I'm super excited to show you my Monstera collection because it's probably my second favorite genus right after philodendron. Monsteras were some of the first plants I bought, the first plants I made a lot of learnings with, first plants I put on a moss pile, first plant I did a chop and extend with, and so on. So Monstera really has a special place in my heart, and some of them have been with me for over 5 years. However, I do know that not everybody loves Monsteras. I think some people really don't like the fenestrations, kind of like, why would my plant have more hole than leaf? And I can somehow understand that, but I actually really like the fenestrations. They are my favorite part in that genus for sure. So hopefully today this video is going to be a feast for Monstera lovers, and if you're a Monstera hater, then hopefully this video can convince you to maybe give them one more shot. I will rank them out of 10, with obviously 1 being terrible and 10 being amazing. Well, hopefully there won't be any 1s in here, because why would I have them in my collection if they're terrible? But keep in mind, this is just my opinion, heavily influenced by my sense of aesthetics, my experience growing them as well. Of course, if a plant is growing well for me, then I'm more likely to like it and so on. But I would love for you to contribute in the comment section down below as well. How do you feel about Monstera? What's your favorite Monstera in your collection? What's your favorite Monstera in my collection? What is a Monstera that I should really try maybe, you know? If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments down below. Let's make it nice and engaging. But let's start off with the first one. And I'm just taking them out as I come across them. I just walk through my house and garden. So there's no chronological order in which they appear. Alrighty, first up we have Monstera esqueleto. Let me show you all of her over here. It would be good if I would just have a plain white backdrop. Hey, the Monstera leaves would look a little bit better, but sorry. Look at this newest leaf unfurling over here. Look, I did a full plant spotlight video on this plant only relatively recently. If you've watched that, you know all about it. I think it has grown the best ever since that video. This is definitely the biggest and nicest leaf it has ever grown. And this is like exactly what I like Monsteras for, right? These beautiful fenestrations, even with the inner fenestrations in the center over here. And then I really like how roundish this leaf is as well. So this is definitely one of my favorite leaves any Monstera of mine has ever grown. So I would have to give this a really high ranking, especially knowing that these subsequent leaves will even get bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't want to start off with a 10 on our first plant, but maybe I'll give it a 9.5. If this wouldn't be the first plant I picked up, I would actually give it a 10, but I want to leave a little bit of room for improvement. So let's give it a 9.5. Okay, let's not do half stars, because editing Jan doesn't know how to do half stars. Let's do 9. Let's do that. Alrighty, next up, and slightly smaller, but not any less impactful, my Monstera obliqua, and I've done a full video on this plant recently as well. It is definitely sending out lots and lots of runners again, which I will just chop off, but that's okay. Look, I know that this plant likes to run away, and the sentiment in the comment section was very similar. A lot of people have actually told me that they've given up on this plant because of the crazy amount of runners this plant likes to send out, but I still think it looks really nice. I mean, I think I need to tilt it a little bit more so you can really see the leaves properly. I think it is just such a nice Monstera. Maybe this also got something to do with this kind of being considered the holy grail at the time I started my collection, so it always kind of, you know, set the gold standard for what Monsteras are supposed to be like. I like these fenestrations and how dainty the leaves look, and look at these teeny tiny like pieces of leaf in between, like holding this leaf together for dear life. I think it's really cute, but I can see how somebody could say like, oh, it looks like it's been eaten by something, or it looks kind of like sick, you know, but it actually looks really, really healthy. Super nice leaves, hardly any discoloration. So I'm really, really happy with this plant, the way that it's grown. And I think compared to a lot of the other Monsteras we're going to see in today's video, it's really nice and compact, small, doesn't take up too much space. So a very reasonable candidate for an indoor collection if you don't have that much space available. But also in the comment section under the last video, most people agreed that it should have somewhere over 50% humidity. That was kind of like the consensus in the comment section. So that could be the only challenge, but that's not really a challenge for me in Sydney, but I have it in the IKEA cabinet anyway. All right, enough talk, let's give it a ranking. I think if it wasn't prone to grow runners like it does, it would get a higher ranking. But I still really can't complain about this plant. I think it looks so stunning. So I would give it a 7 out of 10. I like it a lot. I'm trying to kind of build up a wall of Monstera behind me as I go through them. Cute. All right, that's actually all from the office. So those two are in the office. We're moving on to the living area. Alrighty, here we are, my Monstera Thai constellation. Let me quickly put her down, because she is heavy. She is a work in progress. I historically have always grown her as a trailer. So she was kind of crawling along the pot, and all of the leaves were actually facing this way, like away from the camera right now. It was taking up too much space, getting towards the edge of the pot, couldn't really upsize the pot any further, so I decided to go vertically. You don't have to grow her vertically, but it is going to be more space efficient going forward. So yeah, at the moment the leaves are all kind of readjusting, starting to face forward rather than backwards, so it's still in a little bit of shambles, but it has grown this new leaf since I gave it a poll. Why are you... I can see some thrips on this leaf over here. I don't think you can see thrips there right now, but can you see this rusty discoloration? That is thrips damage. Alright, not a surprise because the plant next to it also had thrips, so I'll put this outside and I'll treat it with contender spray. That usually seems to be quite effective in dealing with it. On that note, thrips is definitely by far the most common pest I have experienced with my Monsteras, but my thrips aren't black thrips. They are like brown, or like I don't know what they're officially called, but I've heard people, especially in Europe, have a much harder time with black thrips. The ones that we get over here don't seem to be too bad, so usually 1 or 2 applications of contender spray keep them in check. I feel like spider mites is not as big of an issue with most of my Monsteras, so really I think thrips and scale are the two pests to look out for on at least my Monsteras, at least over here. Anyway, look, she is a little bit of a mess at the moment, so I think visually she's not like my favorite. I also think she's a very, very slow grower, specifically with maturity. She grows quite slowly, but I think it was also because she was extremely root bound the whole time. So hopefully with the moss pole, and then eventually once it climbs up the moss pole, it's going to speed up a little bit more. But I don't think the slow speed is necessarily an issue because, well, she is taking up a lot of space, so she would be growing even faster. I don't actually know what to do. I think I would say a 7 out of 10 because it's also some of the nicest variegation in the game, I think. It's more stable variegation compared to the elbow. She sizes up really nicely compared to the elbow. So yeah, I think I would give her a 7. Alrighty, next up we've got my Monstera deliciosa elbow variegata. Also has struggled. This one I can bring a bit closer. Again, can you see these red discolorations over here slightly, and then obviously the browning? That is thrips. Like this sort of reddish thing, super clear indicator that this is thrips. But that's not the only damage she's experienced. This over here is light damage. It got burnt. But regardless, it is growing a new leaf over here, and that is looking good. So yeah, this one and the Thai are right next to each other, so I'm not surprised that they both have thrips actually. This one also has a crazy root system. Whoop. Now there's like so many forms with Monsteras, and in general I think Monstera is a really confusing genus. I think there's a lot of misinformation out on the internet, and the fact that variegated Monsteras have sold for absorbent amount of money isn't helping, right? Because where a lot of money can be made, people will go out of their way to make part of that money. And as a result of that, there's a lot of misinformation and lies being spread to, you know, upsell stuff. So there is like 7,000 versions of variegated monsteras out there. I mean, ultimately they're all just mutations and then selected for a specific type of mutation, and then that's trying to be reproduced and so on. But what I do know is that there's definitely like a small form and a large form. Now the small form can still mature. This is just a mature small form, but in general I think small form is climbing more with large internodal spacing, whereas a large form has really, really small internodal spacing and sizes up faster. So the Thai, for example, you saw that had really small internodal spacing, sizes up without kind of climbing very fast, whereas this one has gone through many, many chops and extends, so by now would have climbed up 3 or 4 meters worth of moss pole, but isn't necessarily maturing much further than what you can see over here. Anyway, but most importantly, this sort of internal spacing is usually considered a small form. But these words are also thrown around on the internet a lot. Just in general, be really cautious with monsteras and the information that you find online, because I think often it's more upselling techniques than knowledge. This has also been with me for a very long time, and I actually have many of these propagations, which I should probably then get. Alrighty, here they all are. So this is the mother plant, then this is the bottom part, right? So when I do a chop and extend and the plant reaches the top, I chop it in half, I take the top half, I pot it back up. This down here was the top half with now a new extension on. This is the bottom half, also with a new extension on, and I'll do a full video on this. That's why this plant burned. This bottom part of this pole used to be the top. At the top you get less light. I chopped it, I put it back into its east facing window. It was middle of summer and it got burned inside. Anyway, this is the bottom part, and it's reshooting as well. It's giving me one slightly deformed leaf first, but the second leaf is coming and it's looking strong. So this one I grow outdoors, kind of as a little experiment, right? I'm pleased to say that it didn't have thrips outdoors, just the indoor ones had thrips. So in general, I find pest treatment much easier outside because nature just does it. And then these are all propagations from previous versions of that. So I've previously done chop and extends before. When I do chop and extends, you saw this extensive root system that went into the moss pole, meaning that they're all already propagated. So I can chop between the nodes on the moss pole, and then each node is going to form a new plant. And then eventually I can pot them up. And the reason I did that with my Monstera is because I'm actually not super happy with the variegation that my original mother plant shows. I actually think that a lot of the propagations have shown better variegation, and that's because the variegation is ultimately random. If your plant reverts to fully green or fully white, the best thing you can do is chop it and hope that the reshoots will show better variegation. Like this one shows really nice variegation, also with a new one coming out here. I've got this one again showing quite decent variegation. And again, yeah, so you see, growing it into a moss pole, eventually I could chop between the nodes here again and start the cycle again, right? But I've done this so many times by now, all of my friends already have variegated monsteras. And then another one over here, because why not have more? These three that I showed you last are in my greenhouse, and I will keep them in my greenhouse year round as well. But I usually always like to have 1 or 2 on propagation and so on, so that, you know, in case somebody's birthday, Christmas, something's coming up and I don't have a present, I'm like, here. Everybody loves a good variegated Monstera. Alrighty, let me put those 4 back because I don't have that much space, and we just keep the mother plant in the background for, you know, the family portrait. Obviously you got to do a family portrait later. Oh, I forgot to give it a ranking. Look, it's actually one of the plants I've probably propagated the most, passed on the most, that has given not just myself but other people the most joy over the years. And it's definitely always been a staple. And I think I prefer this over the Thai because it grows a little bit more vertically. So I do prefer the Thai variegation, but I would probably still give this an 8 out of 10. They're all ranking pretty high. You can tell I like my Monsteras, right? Alright, next one. Oh, much easier to carry. We're keeping it humble for a moment. This is a variegated Monstera adansonii. Large form. That's what it was sold to me as. And I've seen the mother plant, it can definitely grow large. I think this newest leaf over here is my favorite so far in general. I think variegated adansonii are a big gamble. This is my 4th attempt and the first one that is somewhat successful, so I would not recommend buying this plant, at least at the beginning of the journey. I think if you want to get into monsteras, there's so many other monsteras to grow first, and if you want to get into variegated monsteras, go for the Thai or the albo that I mentioned earlier. You are dirty, huh? Should probably give her a good wash as well. Look, I've had very mixed experiences with it. At the moment we're going strong, but historically we have not. So I would probably give this a 4 out of 10. Not because I don't like the current look, but it's just not reliable enough for me to rank it any higher. Alrighty, next up we've got Monstera Siltepecana El Salvador. And this one currently grows outside, this one grows inside, but I've switched them last week. So this used to be growing outside and this used to grow inside, and then the outside one grew better, but the inside one was already more mature, so I thought, oh, if I put the inside one outdoors, imagine how mature it could get. But I mean, obviously that's only been last week, so give it a little bit of time to adjust. The same happened over here as with the variegated one, you know, reached the top, I chopped it in half, took the top half, potted it back up, but I decided to re-extend both so I can have one indoors, one outdoors, because I like to experiment how they grow, what they prefer, and at the same time I'm always looking for plants that can survive year-round in my garden over here in Sydney. We don't have frost, but you know, it goes down to 2, 3, 4 degrees at night time, even if it's just a couple of times over winter, right? It's not consistently 4 degrees the whole time. But look, all it takes is really one cold snap for these to have significant damage, and then they can take a whole year to recover. We're gonna see an example of that later. So basically, I'm always looking for plants that can kind of tolerate that sort of condition outdoors, and that's why I wanted to try 2, right? So I can have one outdoors over winter, see if it survives, and if not, that's okay, because I have a backup indoors as well. So yeah, see how we go after this winter. Overall, really love this plant. It is probably one of the harder ones to get fenestrations on, look, I think it took me maybe 2 years or so to get the first fenestrations, I reckon. But it is actually sizing up quite nicely. And I love these sized up leaves, even if they don't have much fenestrations. They have really beautiful silver markings. This one is a bit wet, by the way, in case there's these weird glary dots. It rained this morning, so much more convenient to bring all of the plants inside when they're wet and disgusting, right? Also a great candidate to make really lush poles, right? I often just have one plant on one side of the pole as like a display. With the deliciosas, for example, the Thai as well as the albo, I feel like having multiple plants on there would make it kind of messy, right? They have nice structure as they are. But with those ones, I think I really enjoy a nice lush look. So there's multiple plants on both of them here. So it's always lush, there's always a new leaf. When it reaches the top, I'm not super strict with my chop and extend. I sometimes just decide to trail it back down again, because I'm not necessarily just aiming for size over here. I'm aiming for a lush pole full of leaves. However, I do like the fenestrations. Overall, I think a very different Monstera to the ones I've shown you before. And for people that might not enjoy the traditional Monstera look with all the fenestrations, maybe a Siltepecana would tickle your fancy, because it also has the nice silver. I didn't think these rankings through, by the way. I'm just coming up with them as we speak. I don't remember. What did I give all the other ones? It's definitely not as nice as an esqueleto, which got a 9, right? I reckon, let's give it a 7. Yes, I'm happy with a 7. All right, the next one is going to be a mission. Okay, this doesn't want to stand, so let's make it quick, then I move this out and then we can talk about it a little bit more. This is my Monstera adansonii. I believe this is subspecies laniata. At least that's what I have been told by people in my DMs on Instagram. Over here, it is just being sold as Monstera adansonii, but I have seen differences in leaves. They can all mature, they can all grow large. I think it's a misconception that all Monstera adansonii are small. You're just not letting them mature. But I think the subspecies laniata gives it that specific look on the leaves with these smaller inner fenestrations. Look, this has been one of my first plants and one of the plants that has really kick-started my love for aeroids, my love for moss poles, and it's always going to be one of my favorites. Again, same process as with the other two that I discussed before. This is the bottom part of this. So this used to be growing on top of here. I then chopped it, replanted the top, re-extended that. That's my indoor plant. That's my main mother plant that I grow right in that corner over here. This one over here grows outdoors. Again, just to see what the difference is. I also, when growing outdoors, try different mediums. So instead of filling the pole with moss, I filled it with aeroid mix, because outside I can make more of a mess, right? And so far so good. It is growing quite well. Of course, the bottom part is a little more challenged than the top, because it needs to re-establish growth and so on. But it is growing quite well out there. Okay, let me quickly move this out and then I can show you the other specimen as well. This one was the bottom part before the previous bottom part was the bottom part, right? So with that chop and extend method, eventually you'll just end up having so many. And I've given so many away already. But this is a kind of a new bottom part. The plant actually completely died because I just put it in the corner of death. But miraculously reshot from the base, and now I kind of like it. I think I'm just gonna keep it like that, but I'm not gonna extend it. I'll just let it trail down, so it's a really nice lush display of juvenile adansonii, because I don't have a juvenile one. Ooh. And then just an example, I also wanted to grow one in my greenhouse. Why not have obviously too many? I need to get rid of some. I will actually get rid of some for the winter. But I think this is a good example of what it looks like when it's single planted. This plant over here is now double planted. Initially my plant has always been triple planted because, well, when it was more juvenile, right, the leaves were smaller. Now that the plant is a little bit more mature, whoop, the leaves in themselves are obviously bigger, so I don't need volume as much because I've got quality instead. But specifically when it's a bit smaller, I think it totally makes sense to double or triple plant this, because this is not looking that good. Of course, because of the light exposure coming from the top in the greenhouse, the leaves are also pointing up. From your perspective, you can pretty much only see pole. Probably this way is a little bit better, but still I think multi-planting really helps. This one also receives light from the front, from my Mother Life Spectrum grow light. That's why the leaves are facing forward rather than kind of upwards like this one that's grown in the greenhouse. So 10 out of 10. I love this plant. It has sentimental value for me because it started off as a, I had just a vine, like just a friend gave me a vine of 4 nodes, unrooted. I cut them into single node cuttings and started them on a moss pole over 5 years ago, and here we are now. We have not really had even that many ups and downs. Definitely sometimes thriving more than others, but we've had lots of inflows over the years. And so she's always been a staple. She's always been really happy and one of the easier growers, in my opinion. So definitely a 10 out of 10 for the adansonii. Oh, so easy. This one I only have once. This is Monstera subpinnata. Probably one of my most neglected monsteras. She has been in the greenhouse for over a year now, even survives winter out there, and I don't have an indoor version, right? Again, with the adansonii, I had two, right? An indoor and outdoor version, which actually, by the way, goes for all of the plants that we are about to see next. They all now come from my greenhouse or the garden, and they don't have an indoor equivalent. But I do like this plant. I think it has, out of all of the monsteras, a very unique leaf shape. Specifically, kind of eventually when they mature a little bit. It's giving me palm vibes. And again, I think a great candidate for multi-planting so that you can create a nice lush pole. Because it grows in the greenhouse as well, it's another aeroid mix pole because I have a much easier time watering with the hose. Don't have to worry about the mess. Overall, I think one of the monsteras I have the least experiences with. One of the ones I have the least expectations of as well though. So she can really only over-deliver because I have so little expectations in the first place. So I would actually give this, I think probably 6 out of 10. She's not that pretty, but she's unique. Actually, maybe a 7. If editing Jan would figure out how to do half stars, we could do 6.5. But for today, let's just go with 6. Yeah, let's do that. But I think this could be one of the ones that maybe Monstera hides. needed to see to change their mind, because this is probably the one that looks the least monstera-y. Actually, that's not 100% true. Let's have a look at the next one. Monstera Peru looks even less like a monstera, has a completely different leaf texture, and is also a monstera that I personally have never had success growing in, which is also somewhat unique compared to all the other monsteras. I don't know if it can fenestrate. I do know that it does not size up when putting it on a moss pole, or at least in the attempts that I have made, it did not size up. So I'm now growing it as a trailing plant. It's also in my greenhouse. I spoke about this plant too much on my channel already, and how I'm kind of disappointed because it is just not what I expected. I wanted this plant to grow up a moss pole, size up, give me fenestrations. That's what I love about monsteras. And it didn't do that for me. So I was a bit disappointed, but I'm changing my mindset. I'm happy with it trailing now. So I'm just paying it no mind. It can do its thing. I don't have any goals apart from just being a filler in the greenhouse, and hopefully it's surviving the greenhouse year round as well. So I would probably have to give this a 4, unfortunately. I think the leaf texture is what's really saving it, but if you like this texture, I would much rather have like an anthurium, for example. For people that really don't like monstera, this might be the monstera that you like, because it doesn't look like a monstera, right? I'm even hesitant to include you in the family photo. I don't know if you deserve that. Alrighty, next up we've got Monstera dubia, and I also have to hold on for dear life with this one. It does not want to stand anymore. It lives outside, and it's hooked up against my fence out there. You can also see that it's just had a chop, right? So it is, the top half is pretty empty. All of the growth is kind of down there. I don't know, can you see this? This is what she looks like. Might have to just put a little bit of B-roll in there while I talk to you about her. Oh my god, I'm making a crazy mess in here. She used to be one of my favorites, and Monstera dubia, when juvenile, is a really nice shingling plant, and I really missed that stage, I have to say. Well, I was aiming for maturity, and I loved the journey of, you know, getting it to mature. That's exciting to me. And I do also love the fenestrated leaves. I always wanted to grow one of each, a mature one and a juvenile one. Now, the mature one takes up too much space indoors. When I moved into this house over here, I could not fit her indoors anymore, so she had to move into the garden, and she was thriving over the warmer season in the garden. I had to keep her outside year round because I don't have space for her to come back inside. So she was out there all year, and well, winter didn't kill her. She's obviously alive, but she hasn't really been growing much over winter. And then over spring, I was expecting a nice recovery, but still not really much. I even chopped her back. This is the bottom part, this is the top part. The latest leaf rotted. I don't know. So she just hasn't really grown much over the last year, but also hasn't died back over the last year. So we're just in limbo. Anyway, that's when I performed the chop, and I want to keep this one a little bit more juvenile, but you can already see that the leaves are maturing a little bit too much. So I probably need a more juvenile version again. I used to have that as well, but I gave that to Tim to put in his garden, which is now also maturing crazy, and he also has a really beautiful one indoors. So this is another one of these plants that has gone through 3-4 chop and extends over the 5 years of having it. And with 3-4 chop and extends come 3 to 4 bottom parts, right? That I grew, then I gave away because I had a new bottom part that replaces the old bottom part, and so on. I even grew this plant on a pole before without a pot, just on a moss pole hanging on a tree, and it was thriving and even maturing without a pot, and so on. So I've always had an easy time growing this plant until it was at the mercy of Sydney's weather. But yeah, look, ultimately it was more about the journey of getting it to maturity. Once I've seen it mature, I'm like, okay, been there, done that. I still like the plant, but I'm not going to reserve a prime spot in my house for it. I much rather have the adansonii, for example, or the variegated ones. So I would give this, as it is, a 6 out of 10, but the growing journey and the transformation from juvenile to mature leaves is a 10 out of 10 for me. That is exactly what I refer to when I say enjoy the journey of growth, where you never know what the next leaf is going to be like, you don't know when it's giving you its first fenestrations, and so on. That was just so much fun. I definitely recommend growing one on. I just don't know what to do with it once you've grown it. I will somehow at some stage, you know, take some propagations again and start a really small cutting on a pole and give it terrible conditions so it stays juvenile and so on. But for now, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we are in autumn again, so we're heading back into winter, and this plant hasn't even really recovered from the last winter yet, so I'm not super confident about this plant this year round. But as I mentioned, I've got backups in friends' places, in friends' gardens, in my own garden and so on. We'll be just fine. So what did I give it? A 6 out of 10. Yeah, so be it. Alright, just to show you, there's a few cuttings on here, and see when they're more juvenile, they're more shingling and have more silver, but yeah, this pole in itself isn't necessarily looking all too good. But yeah, it's a recovery project. Oh my god, guys, look at this. This plant has rooted so well into the fence and into the ground. I just pulled all of this out when I moved the plant. Look at the roots. It was going everywhere. Oh my god, look at all of this. Yeah, half of the plant is not even on the pole anymore. It's just growing everywhere. But that is also okay. This is my Monstera Siltepecana. And she is also somewhat mature. But if you compare that to the El Salvador variety I showed you earlier, it's not going to grow as large of a leaf and not as silver of a leaf. But the same applies what I mentioned to the El Salvador before, how I don't necessarily aim for like frequent chop and extends over there, you know. I think this is a great one to have multi-planted, and it's really space compact. There's like probably 20 vines on here and it's still not spreading really much. So if you have vertical space but not horizontal space, this is a great candidate to kind of, you know, be space efficient, yet fill that vertical space quite well. But overall, I don't have all too much to say about her. She's definitely a filler for me. One moment, please. Oh my god. Sorry guys, the light changes so much in here. Every time I come back, the light is completely different, but it is a really, you can see the sun coming. Dealing with plants means dealing with the elements, and light is an element that I can't control, unfortunately, or at least the natural light. Anyway, you might remember there's a video where, well, guess what? This was actually the first plant I ever put on a moss pole. So, of course, I would have, throughout the years, gone through many chop and extends with this plant as well. And one of the bottom parts ended up in Tim's parents' place. It was way overgrown. I've done a full video on that, and I took hundreds of propagations from this plant. The bottom part of the pole is now back with them and it's looking really lush, but some of these propagations that I took, I put in here in an attempt to make it grow as a crawler. And I actually really like this really lush, bushy pot of Siltepecana. You can really see they're quite small. They have a little bit more silver when they're small, but not as much silver as the El Salvador. So I'm going to keep growing this as a trailer and see if I like it, because I don't think the mature form, while the fenestrations are kind of cute and they stay compact, I don't think it's like that amazing. You know what I mean? It's not like, I don't look at the leaf and I'm like, this is the most beautiful leaf I've ever seen. So I want to try it like this. And maybe as a trailer, it will change my mind. But for now, I would give this a 5 out of 10. On my scale, but I can understand that somebody might actually like this juvenile version a lot out of all the Monsteras that I've shown you. If you don't like Monsteras, you might like this juvenile form of Siltepecana. I think we should keep the juvenile form here for the photo. Don't you think? Adds a little bit more interest. We have enough poles already. We'll put this back outside. Next up, we've got the pinnatipartita. Story time. I've had a really tricky time growing this plant initially. When juvenile, and you can see this, I mean, they're all pretty juvenile at this stage still. Maybe this one's a good. When juvenile, like this over here, you can see it's somewhat similar to the Peru actually, and I think they get confused when juvenile as well. However, this one can size up much better. But I never had success with sizing it up indoors. Even in a nice west-facing window, it was just climbing up the moss pole with fairly large internodal spacing, wasn't really doing anything. You can see, and I chopped it since, and there's lots of little cuttings here now. You can see they were like, you know, it was just running away until I put it outside where it started growing like crazy. Look how thick the stem has gotten. And each one of these is an internode. So very small internodal spacing. It grew huge leaves, probably 4 times the size of this one. And nicer fenestrations. This one has now gone through a full winter, so it's suffered a little bit. Unfortunately, I cannot find good footage of when this plant was thriving, but I eventually noticed it going very yellow outside over winter. This Monstera pinnatipartita has cold damage. It just spent winter out in my courtyard and it did not like the cold temperatures it was exposed to. And then it dropped all of its leaves. That's when I put it inside, try rehab it, but it was obviously a bit too late at this stage. By the time you see visual damage, it's a little too late. Very similar to the dubia. I was hoping for it to recover over spring and it has recovered. And I mean, you have like a little plant here now, a little plant here, a little plant here, 7,000 little plants down here, but none of them is really maturing. And yeah, as I mentioned, we're going back into winter, so it hasn't even really recovered from the last winter's shock, and we're about to have another one. So I think this year I will try and not keep this outside, because I actually really like this plant when it matured. I thought it had some of the most interesting leaves, and again, it's giving me that beautiful transformation from juvenile to mature that I really enjoy, that sort of journey, right? So I would probably give it a 6 out of 10 because I find it the most tricky one out of all of the ones I showed you so far. And I think indoors I won't actually give it the conditions that it needs to mature, but I also don't want to have a big setback again. So it's going to be a challenge to keep this plant happy and turn it into something that actually looks nice. That's why it's only a 6 out of 10, but because I'm intrigued, it kind of triggered the ambitious part in me, right? Where I'm like, I really want to try at least. With the dubia, you know, I've been there, done that. I'm not super ambitious about the dubia anymore. With this one, I am. I want to see this grow really nice again. See how we go. For now, a 6 out of 10, sorry. Next one, and again I only have one of those. This is a Monstera deliciosa Brazil form. It's just a little edgier, more fenestrations, less leaf on this one, right? I really like these fenestrations on this plant, and it's a really easy grower. Been outdoors year round, has not even reduced in leaves. Yeah, a really good plant, really easy plant. Like basically the same care requirement as a normal, regular green deliciosa, but slightly more interesting fenestration. So I'm here for that. I used to grow it on a wooden piece of bark. It rooted really heavily into that, but I want to continue growing it on a moss pole going forward. So I just chucked a moss pole on top of it and I let it find its own way. So easy, right? I would probably give this an 8 out of 10. I really like this plant. And it's just green. It's just green and it has nice fenestrations, just has a nice growth pattern. Nothing to complain about, right? It doesn't need to be super fancy. I honestly thought we'd be done by now. I forgot how many plants, how many Monsteras I have. I think there's one more out there, hang on. Oh no! I should have definitely planned that through a little bit better, because now the last one is my least favorite one, and that's not how I wanted to end this video. This is my Monstera adansonii Indonesian marble. I don't even think you can see much, because there's not much to this plant. Look at these leaves. But I have been complaining about this plant enough over the last few weeks already. I've done a video where I said I'm not going to buy this, and then I reacted to it and all of that. So I think you guys know by now I don't like this plant, but it is, I suppose, a good reminder of what I said earlier with, you know, people selling things because it's trendy, and mint variegation and blizzard and storm and whatever. Just because it's available for purchase and somebody gave it a fancy name does not mean it's a good plant to buy or grow. This plant is just so deformed and so ugly. I put it outside hoping that that would kind of fix it, and it actually made it worse. So at this stage I would actually give this plant a 2 out of 10. It gets 2 because when juvenile it actually has kind of cute fenestrations down there somewhere. But whatever's happening up here needs to stop immediately. So I gotta get on top of this plant. It's at this stage literally a waste of space. I don't know, but don't buy this. I'm not even gonna allow it to be included in the photo. Sorry. actually not sorry at all. And that is it. This is my entire Monstera collection. To be honest, yesterday night when I was like, okay, tomorrow morning, let's film that video, I went through all of my Monsteras in my head, kind of just to like, how many do I even have? And I forgot about the subpinnata, the Brazil, and the dubia. They completely, I forgot I have them. And I don't even have that many Monsteras, I feel like. I think in the grand scheme of things, Monstera is a really confusing genus and they often end up looking very similar. So if you're not a big Monstera fan and you look at those and you're like, you know what, they all look the same, I wouldn't even blame you. I do love my Monstera genus, but I don't have any more Monsteras on my wish list where I'm like, I need this because it has features that none of my other Monsteras already have. I think I have a good variety of variegated plants, green plants, different kinds of fenestrations, like, you know, or this one, and then I think the El Salvador has really different fenestrations as well. So I think I have like a decent mix, but in the grand scheme of things, they are getting more similar than they are getting different for me as well. So I don't think I'm adding any more Monsteras to my collection in the foreseeable future, despite the fact that there are others available, like laniatas and small form and large form and wide form and narrow form and acuminata and what's not. I'm happy with my collection as it is, and I'm happy to actually just grow multiple ones of the ones I already have. Like you saw, most of my Monsteras, I actually have 2 or 3 of the same kind because I just really like them and they grow, so I propagate them and then I have multiples. Why not? They are one of the best genus for me to grow in my garden, and I'm always looking for plants that can be in my garden year round so they can be impactful in my garden and look nice without me having to worry about them dying, right? And that's the difference between the adansonii getting a 10 and the pinnatipartita getting a, what did I give it? Maybe a 6 or something like that. The ease of growing, right? That's one of the things I appreciate the most about my Monsteras. Well, at least the ease of growing over here in Sydney. Can't speak for that worldwide, but I think every good houseplant collection should have at least a couple of Monsteras in it. Anyway, I think it is time to finally take our group photo. Sweet. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Please also leave a comment down below. Talk to me about Monstera. All things Monstera. What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? How do you feel about my Monstera collection? What's your favorite in my collection? What's your favorite in your collection? Are you having a good time growing them? Are you having a bad time growing them? Is there a Monstera that I'm missing in my collection that I must add? Absolutely 1000%. Let me know in the comment section. Let's start a conversation. Also make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell notification so you're informed when I upload a next video. But for now, goodbye and happy growing.